Hello, Chicago. Welcome to Ignite. What a great time slot we've been fortunate enough. We were just up here talking about, we don't know what's worse, 5 o'clock, last show of the day, or 8 o'clock after the attendee party. So we're super excited to see all of you here today. I'm Brent Allinger. Oops, sorry about that. I'm Brent Allinger. I manage the team that's responsible for all the in-market product updates for Exchange Server, as well as I manage the team that will be releasing Exchange Server 2016 to all of you later this year. And on my partner in crime today, I have Paul, and I'll let him say a few words about himself.
So Brent is failing to mention that among his other responsibilities, he is the Duke of Dog Food and the Sultan of Serviceability on the Exchange team. So I encourage you to refer to him using those titles anytime you're talking to him.
Oh, thank you.
I'm an Exchange MVP. I've been one for about 12 years now, and I spend a lot of time working with customers who have patching and supportability and serviceability questions. So what we wanted to do in this presentation is spend some time talking about how Exchange servicing works. What happens behind the scenes? How does Microsoft put together the bits that make their way through the release process, both into the service, but also into the updates that you download and put on your servers? And then what does it mean to say that something is supported or not supported or supportable? For those of you that went to Jeff Meliff's session earlier, you probably heard some things that may have surprised you a little bit about supportability for Exchange on infrastructure as a service platforms. Well, hopefully what we have to say will help put some of that in context in terms of what it means for something to be supported or to not be supported. If nothing else, when you leave this presentation, you will at least be able to say you were not stuck in Chicago traffic during rush hour, so we've got that going for us.
Or a bus line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So with that in mind, Paul and I would really kind of like to take a feel for the room just to find out who our audience is. And there are no penalties for giving the wrong answer here. Honesty is highly regarded. Any Exchange Server 2003 customers in the room? Go ahead.
It's all right. You're among friends.
Okay, good. 2007. Okay. 2010. Good
Looking
number
better.
of you. 2013. Oh, good mix.
Lotus Notes. Be gone.
I got a couple over here.
Leave now.
I've got something for you.
Hey,
Sorry.
a good call. Good call.
I'm not a baseball player. Ask my son.
Yeah, these shirts are hard to throw.
Yeah. 0365.
Ooh, looking kind of
Good.
tentative there. Man.
Hybrid or cloud only? Great. Okay. So Paul told you, our goal really here is we want to open up the hood and give you the perspective of the engineering team of what it means to service the product and give you some insight into the engineering practices that we go through. So let's just jump right into it. To set some context, I thought it would give you some background on how Exchange is actually built on any given day. The engineering infrastructure that we have in place is pretty elaborate. But it's also something that has evolved over time. It's about 19 years ago that Exchange 4.0 was released into the wild. Depending on whose day you choose, we're within that plus or minus 10 to 15 days actually. So it's we should be throwing a birthday party for Exchange if you ask me. But they don't ask me these things. They just say,
I'll bring the cake. Brent is buying drinks.
Okay, sure. Okay. But a lot's changed in that time frame. If you were to deploy Exchange 19 years ago, you were going into uncharted water. At that time, email was not really considered commercially valued inside of most organizations. And if you were doing it, you were more concerned with how you connect disparate mail systems. CC Mail, MS Mail, Profs. If you were an IBM shop, how would you get that mail connected together? If you were choosing to deploy Exchange at that time, your first major architectural decision that you had to make was which architecture for your hardware were you going to choose? Are you going to do x86? Or are you going to do PowerPC? Or are you going to go for that killer chip, the Alpha from Digital, because that was the workhorse of the day. Compare and contrast that today. Today Exchange is only available on x86 architecture, so that battle's been won. SMTP as a distribution is ubiquitous now for every type of message. We don't even assume that there's any other type of mail that we would even consider talking with system. Everything is based on SMTP. And at the same time, in response to those monumental shifts that have occurred inside of the messaging ecosystem, Exchange and Microsoft have evolved in our way of thinking. Increasingly today, as some of you have already indicated, you're equally likely to be running Exchange in your own hosted data center or in our hosted data center in Office 365. And so, what I hope to show you today is how we, along with that ecosystem, have evolved in our mentality and how we develop the product, how we service it, how we support it, and how we respond to a more agile environment than what we had 19 years ago.
Absolutely. It's fair to point out, too, that Microsoft as an organization has evolved a lot since then. It's a much bigger company. It has bigger, more demanding customers and more of them. And so along with the growth in people using email and the changes in the environment that's engendered, there's also been, Microsoft has all grown up now. It's not the same company it was when it was first dipping a toe into the email pool. And you all recognize that based on the fact that you've been running, most of you, those of you who are not on notes, have been running Exchange for a while in your environments, and you've benefited from that process maturity that Microsoft has brought to this development and engineering discipline.
So what does the engineering at Microsoft actually look like? Well, first and foremost, the Exchange team has made significant investments in how we develop the product and evaluate it. It might surprise you to know that every day at Microsoft, there's a new version of Exchange built. And we're very proud of that fact. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to actually compile the code and build it. It takes about another 2 to 3 hours to complete the test pass that we use to validate it. The architecture that we use, or the engineering infrastructure that we use, is what we call a distributed development on a common platform. The Exchange team has roughly 500 plus engineers who, at any one given time, are all working on different aspects of the code. And the engineering system that we have allows anybody to check out a replica of all of the source copies onto their local machine, and they can use that to produce a new feature. They can use that to produce a code defect fix or whatever in a distributed way. And it's not all that uncommon for multiple developers to be working on the same sections of the code, but using for different reasons at the same time. And so we have this very elaborate system that helps us manage that. Part of that is a 100% virtualized test and build machine infrastructure. We have over 30,000 virtual machines that we use that are available to our developers to check out in an on-demand basis, where they can actually go in, do some coding, they can test a validation, they can deploy an interesting topology that is representative of a customer environment, or it's just used just to do the build machine. And this is all completely 100% automated, and it's available to every developer to use. In addition to that, we have a more traditional set pieces of that infrastructure. We have about 100,000 test cases, roughly, that we can use at our disposal to validate the product to varying degrees. Now, those individual test cases are actually designed to test the application programming interfaces, or APIs. We don't actually put third-party products into our test environment, but what we do is we validate the interfaces that we provide to independent system vendors so that they can go off and build great experiences and great applications that extend the Exchange. In terms of how we look at the deployment of the code, we have a single active branch that is constantly moving in a go-forward basis. We call it our main. So the goal of every developer is to get into main, their code, such that it becomes a part of that next daily build and that next daily test pass. But what ends up happening is, while we lead forward with that main, we have a tail of multiple active branches behind that are in various states of deployment and validation. And so what I would like to do is kind of walk you through that and show you what that kind of looks like. So I mentioned that, that we have become more agile and we've become more in tune with a rapid fire deployment and creation of Exchange. And our whole validation approach is based on what we call rings of validation, where we have a prescriptive set of gates that the product must proceed through in order to get to the next gate. The first gate that we have is what we call our focus system. And it doesn't matter whether I'm talking about server or service here, because as you've been hearing throughout the day and hearing about, for the better part of a year from our CEO, Satya Nadella, we are a cloud-first organization. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that we have chosen to leverage the cloud as a primary indicator of quality and the ability to improve the product for our server product, that customers deploy in their own environments. The service provides us an unprecedented volume of data and visibility into how the code is responding, where defects are, and it's something that we've never seen before. But getting back to that ring of validation, so the focus represents our primary defense against an errant change inside of the product code. And what happens during this stage is a developer's off working on their workstation. They've got a copy of the code. They've made a change. They're producing a build. They think they've got a fix. And what this system does is it is the primary gatekeeper to allow them to even begin to introduce their change into the production code. They actually submit what's called a focus job, and it will run a concentrated set of test cases against a particular component. Because at this level of validation, we're talking about component consistency and making certain that the fix is doing no harm to the actual component that's in question. We'll run a small set of tests, they'll get a green focus, and then it allows them to check into that main repository that is replicated for everybody else. The other primary thing that the focus system allows us to do is, remember that I said we have multiple developers working in the same areas of the code potentially. So what it actually allows us to do is preempt, before we get to that next daily build, and invalidate developers A's changes against developers B changes at the same time, because they may be a little bit further along in the pipeline. So that's the pre-ring 0. The next stage that we roll out to is what we call our daily test pass. So, and here's where we run that suite of 100,000 tests exhaustively across the new build. And the goal here is to not only, since we've already validated at the component level that the product is working as expected, we're now making certain that we didn't introduce any inherent regression in an unaffected area of the product. You know, it's very possible that someone who was making a change inside a mailbox submission service could have impacted something inside of store driver inadvertently, and it may not have been detected at the focus stage. So the daily test pass becomes our critical path where we start to say, is the product as a whole healthy? It also is where we start to introduce customer-specific requirements into the testing and validation. We have what we call our P0 topos, which is where, you know, we recognize that while O365 is fabulous at running at high scale and high performance and working out the kinks in the product that way, it's a very large monolithic environment and not at all representative of what many of you are running in your own environments. We recognize that your ecosystem is much more complex. You have different AD topologies. You know, parent-child is a classic topology that we've recommended for years to Exchange customers. So many of you run in ResourceForce. Some of you run discontiguous namespaces. All of that needs to be validated, and that's what we're doing inside of these topologies at this stage. You know, all leading up to the point where, you know, our goal is to get at the end, a build that will be successful in your environment first time at the gate. The next stage after that of the daily test pass and the topology discovery phase is what we call where we actually formally introduce dogfooding. And dogfooding is a concept that the Exchange team is extremely proud of. We've done it for 2 decades. And it's where we actually take and put our builds and subject our own selves to those builds as soon as they're finished. And so we actively put them into environments. For the service, we have a dedicated environment that we call Service Dog Food, or SDF, where we have about 1,000 users who get, you know, a daily build. For the on-premises product or the server product, we actually have what we call primary, which is where my mailbox sits, where we have users who are focusing on on-premise scenarios and going through and validating that. We also, at this point, recognize that, you know, while we have very rich abilities to dog food internally, we have a great opportunity to partner with customers outside of Microsoft through our Exchange Preview program or our TAP program. And so it's at this stage that we start to introduce the builds not only to ourselves, but also to external customers, asking them to put them into their lab environment. And there's yet another example here of how we've evolved our thinking. In the 2003, the 2007 timeframe, if you were a member of the TAP, you know, we had this 3-year life cycle, you know, in between releases. Right. There was a beta 1, there was a beta 2, there was a release candidate, and you went, but there were long periods of time in between them, you know, 12 months, you know, 14 months, where you didn't see a build. Fast forward to today, where we look at it as more as an evolution and a continued partnership, we now invoke our TAP partners both customers and ISV partners to engage with us all along the way on a continuous cycle throughout the development of the product. And so it's very common, for our customers to be deploying a CU. CU9 right now, for instance, is out to taps where we actually have them deploying it, which is scheduled for release later this quarter. And that will be followed by CU10 and CU11. And so we're getting that feedback, because if there's one thing that we want to make certain that we're optimizing for, is to make certain that we've taken every opportunity we can to get the feedback from customers and make certain that those builds are going to be successful. So dog fooding, absolutely critical. And in terms of how much time we spend here, each of these arrows represents about a week's worth of time from when we go from stage to stage to stage. A build will spend about a week in SDF. It may be one build that spends the whole time in SDF, or it may be something that we tweak and iterate on, because we have that daily build, we have the ability to quickly refresh and introduce a fix such that we can keep the pipeline running. But the next stage that we go to is then what we call slice in production for the service, where we actually put real live users of O365 experiencing that code for the first time in a controlled manner. We do a slow introduction to a small set of the population, and they start to experience the new code benefits that we have. At the same time, for the server product, we're entering into what's called our DF main, and we're also asking our Exchange Preview customers to go into production. The next stage from there is worldwide deployment for the service, where we go through and actively deploy to all of O365, and then we also do our own corp deployment inside of Exchange. You may have heard that, that Microsoft has moved our messaging platform to the cloud, and that's very much a true statement we have. But we also recognize that we have a continuing commitment to our on-premises customers, and so we do also still maintain an on-premise presence in our own environment so that we can validate and make certain that both the server and the service product are performing as expected. In terms of how long it takes, it might surprise you how quickly we run. The average life cycle of a build in the service is about 4 weeks. From check-in to completed deployment to the next version is about 4 weeks. But for the on-premises customers, because we have some external dependencies and we really value that external validation from customers, we run about 3 months. We've made a commitment to customers that we were going to update Exchange 2013 once a quarter, and we're honoring that commitment. But we're also making certain that we allow the time for due diligence to get the validation to make certain that the product is right. And so if you look at how much time we're actually spending in those tap phases and in those dog food phases, it's about 2 months out of those 3 months.
So I want to stop before Brent proceeds to do the demo that I think he's got on tap, and just ask very briefly, how many of you think that the update cadence for cumulative updates in 2013, how many of you think it's too slow?
Oh, come on.
How many of you think it's too fast? Okay, Goldilocks, how many of you think it's just right? Okay.
Good.
That jives with what I hear when I talk to customers. I wanted to ask the room because, it's kind of a bell curve. I have a few customers who say, oh, this is much too fast. We just can't get updates into production because we're a 200,000 seat global company and we just can't do anything that fast. And I have other customers who, if it was up to them, they would like to do what the Windows 10 Insider program folks do, and they'd like to get daily builds of new releases of Exchange if they could. But most people fall in the middle. That quarterly update cadence is comfortable, and now that you've adapted to it, kind of like with Patch Tuesday, right? Everybody understands first Tuesday of every month, you're going to get patches, regular schedule, predictable cadence. Microsoft has built a track record of consistency across that time. But I wanted to see kind of whether the data supports my intuition that most customers find that to be a reasonable pace.
Great. So what I thought I would do is, there's an unwritten rule in Microsoft, and unless you have a website that shows what you say is true, it's not true. So I actually produced a very small portal that shows you our dog food environment, shows you the status of it, and so what I thought I would do is log in and give you some insight into what's going on. So you'll find that I have a plethora of UI skills here. This is my great attempt at a portal console here. But it serves as my dashboard to know what's going on inside of the dog food environment. Not surprisingly, as in most companies, MSIT has a portal where you can actually go in and look up and find out support information about your environment that you're in. So this is actually a live scene. I'm actually hitting servers back in Redmond. This is the details for my mailbox. And so just to prove to you that I am a dog fooder and that we do still have dog food environment, if you look here, you can see that my mailbox is in the on-premises dog food environment. I'm in primary. I'm on build version 166.1. You can see my server name that's there, CO1 E16PRIO2, has the active copy of my database. You can also see my phone number, so I should probably get that off the screen. Because although I love to hear from customers, I'm not capable of scaling to 200 million phone calls a day. Sorry. And then what I'll do is I'll actually open up the dashboard for our dog food environment. And this is the actual current status. As of 15:15, 6 minutes ago, this page updates every hour. This is the current status of Exchange dog fooding in the on-premises environment. And what you'll see is across the top there in blue, you'll see that we have a representative example of Exchange 2010, 2013, and 2016. Yes, we are still dog fooding 2010 because it's still in support. If you direct your eyes to the middle, you'll see the number of mailboxes that we actually have in each of those environments. And what I would caution you there is, while most of you probably think of your environments as being very static and your users being in a controlled environment, that is not at all the case that we have here. You're probably saying, Brent, why are there so many people on 2013 if 2016 is coming? Well, that's because we're still going to be shipping CU9 here in the next 6 to 7 weeks. And so we want to make certain that we're doing validation. And so it's very common inside the Microsoft environment for your mailbox to be considered to be something very fluid. You may be on version 2016 today and back on 2010 tomorrow. You may be in the cloud next week and then back on prem the week after that. We actually actively move our mailboxes around to make certain that we're getting as much validation as we possibly can.
So who remembers Pilgrim from Exchange 5.5 Service Pack 1? Remember how hard it used to be to move a mailbox? The fact that Brent can stand up here without batting an eyelash and say, oh yeah, we move mailboxes from dog food version A to dog food version B to the cloud and back again, and nobody thinks that's remarkable, and nobody thinks it's unusual, and users are not there with torches and pitchforks. That's a really good indicator of the kind of engineering maturity that I was talking about earlier. The fact that that stuff, it just works. It's like a light switch. You move a mailbox, the mailbox moves, everybody goes on about their business.
It's quite remarkable. It's a very dynamic environment to be in. And so if I scroll down here and you look in the third column, you'll see that we have a bunch of servers here in our Dublin data center that are running CU9. If I scroll down here, you can see primary, where we have E16 and a number of mailboxes. You'll also notice that inside of each green bars, these represent an Active Directory site. So some of them are running a pure version of Exchange. If I look at NAWA CO1 DC, which is our Columbia data center out in Columbia, Washington, I have E15 CU9 and E16 running side by side within the same site. So if you were at Ross Smith's talk earlier today, you heard about the simplicity of the migration between 2013 and 2016 because you could put the same servers in the VIP. Here it is running live. We know it works. We up proxy, we down proxy. It's just, the flexibility that we have is fabulous. And if I keep going, you'll find that, yes, I still have E14 SP3. And then I can get the full list of all the databases that I have inside of the DAGs. And it's quite remarkable. And if you recall, you'll see, you remember that my server was CO1 E16 PRIO2. There's my server right there. It's running Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center, our expected supported OS when we release later this year.
But if you look right below that, you'll see that there are 2008 R2 and even 2008 machines still in the topology, because guess what? Customers still have them.
Absolutely. And they're still supported. And just to continue to prove that this is really real, and to satisfy those people who blog to say, when you release something and something doesn't go exactly right, why don't you do field testing? I thought I would actually log into my Microsoft account. This is a little dangerous, opening up my real live mailbox in an open forum, but, hey, we're all amongst friends here, right?
You've already given everyone your phone number, so how could it get worse?
Absolutely, would you like my home address too? That's readily available on the internet. So
Please don't anybody drunk dial Brent tonight, by the way. Seriously.
Yeah.
All joking aside, don't do that. Not cool.
So here we are Exchange Server 2016, running in our own dog food environment. I promised my friend Kip, I felt so bad for him this morning, that his demo, the network just didn't cooperate with him. I said, you know what, it's such a shame that you didn't actually get to show that great edit reply feature. Let me try to do it for you in mind, because it's actually live on my mailbox. And so, I sent myself a little spreadsheet here because, again, we go through monthly review after monthly review with our senior management to review statistics. And so you've already seen Word, I believe, running side by side. You've already seen PowerPoint running side by side. Let's just prove that Excel works side by side. There we go. I've clicked on the link. Excel Online is going to fire up here. There we go. Office Web App Servers in action. I'm going to get my content opened up into the document here. Come on, there we go. Here comes my data. Fabulous. Excel side by side in OA 2016. I can do the compose on the right. If I want to edit it, make a change to it, come down here, highlight a particular piece of the data, it's going to make a copy of that message. I can come in here. Excel Online is going to launch up again. Here's the document. I can scroll around. I can edit. I can highlight things. I can say, call attention to this number here, because that's something that I want to emphasize when I talk to Rajesh next month, because, he's really worried about support costs. I can click send. It's going to save those changes back to the OA server. It's going to send the message back to myself. It's going to be in my inbox. There we go. There's my boss responding to me. Please don't read that one. But here's the message that I just sent to myself. If I come back in here, go back in and, oops, I didn't want to do download. I could do download, obviously, because that works, but I'm going to go back in and view. Here we go. Going to open up that document, and there's the change that I made inside of Office Web App Servers, inside of OA 2016. I never opened up Excel. I never left the browser, yet I'm completely and totally in tune with everything that's going on.
This means that there is no escape from Office.
There is no escape from Office.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
Excel everywhere, forever.
So for those of you who missed it this morning, there we go. Proof that it works. And a great demo of Exchange Server 2016 in action inside of Microsoft's own dog fooding environment. So let's jump back over here.
All right, let's see. I think we had a demo placeholder slide.
Yes.
We done did that already. All right. So I want to talk for a second about the Exchange Tap. Brent mentioned that the TAP program is one of the key ways that these bits get in front of live customers who can use them. TAP is really heavily deployment focused, right? The goal of the TAP is that Microsoft wants to put these bits into live customer environments so that you can use them. You can give feedback on features. You can give feedback on software quality, on how things work, to give Microsoft that real world feedback. Because running inside Microsoft and running in the service gives them a great deal of test data about those particular environments. But if there are 300 people in this room, you probably have 350 different environment configurations that don't match what Microsoft is running. So, Brent, you want to talk about how you get into the TAP?
Absolutely.
There's a blood test, right, and a loyalty oath?
It's not quite that painful.
Okay, well,
it's a little bit simpler. You do have to sign, a non-disclosure agreement. But the good news is even our non-disclosure agreements have gotten simpler. We've unified the non-disclosure agreement across all of Microsoft. So if you want to participate in the Windows TAP or you want to participate in the Exchange TAP, you only need to do one agreement now. And what that affords you the opportunity to do is get early access to our builds, validate them in your environment, provide us critical feedback, and we really do want your feedback. At the end of the day, we want to keep this rich ecosystem of customers who are using our products healthy and viable, and we can only do that if we get your feedback. So if you're interested and so inclined, Dave Espinoza and Kern Hardman are downstairs on the expo every day. They'd be happy to talk to you. We have a representative right here in the orange shirt who could talk to you right here in the room, and they could give you more information. There's no harm in asking the question, and if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, no harm done. So please consider it. So with that, I'm going to kind of shift gears and talk about the actual servicing aspects, or what happens inside of Microsoft. Once we've released the product, how do we? What are the decisions that we go through? What are the processes that we go through to make certain that customers continue to have a great experience with that product after it's been released? And I thought I would run through some guiding principles pretty quickly here to show you what are the things that matter most to us. First of all, cloud first, service accrues to server. Can't overemphasize that enough, but I'm not going to belabor it. I think that stands for itself. But the point that I really do want to drive home is that the Exchange team is absolutely committed to quality. I mentioned previously that we made a commitment to customers to provide cumulative updates on a quarterly basis. We recognize that you need predictable schedules. You need to introduce this into your planning. You have change management requirements. You need to do validation in your labs. And we totally want to help you be successful and understand when you can expect updates to Exchange. Whether they're a regular update that you're looking for or whether it's something that you've asked for in response to a CSS escalation case. But the one thing I want to caution you is that we tend to not be a date-driven organization. And by that I mean we'll set a deadline and we'll target it, but if the code is not at the right level of quality, we will not release it. Quality is job number one for us. Security is job number two. So whenever we have a request to change the product, these are the things that are foremost in our mind is, we want to make certain that customers have a great experience around security, but also around quality. The other thing that we've learned over the years is that layering of multiple packages of software that we spit out to you is not always the most optimal approach. In fact, when customers have problems with installations or things go sideways because you've taken a particular RU or a particular CU, or a particular RU, I won't say CU because it's a different technology, it's quite often due to something that has happened underneath. Exchange uses MSI technology based upon customer feedback to actually install our product. And so when you install a CU or when you install a service pack or when you install the RTM version of the product, what you're actually doing is unpackaging an MSI installation and laying down the binaries, and then we run some configuration scripts and create AD objects and do all kinds of stuff that make Exchange work. But when it comes time to service that through an RU or a security update or something like that, you're actually doing you're applying an MSP package, which from a technological perspective is we take the original MSI, we do a new build of Exchange, we perform a diff, and then the MSP package becomes the files that were the delta between the two. And so over time, what ends up happening is you get into the state where you start layering multiple versions of those and versions of those. And there's also another interesting phenomenon that happens. When we shifted to managed code, if you've actually ever noticed, and particularly I'm speaking to the 2007 customers here because you're experiencing this in a big way. You probably go and get to the download center and download SP3 RU14, I believe is the current, or 17, I can't remember, sorry. Have 3 active trains. And you look at the KB article list and it says that there's one change in there. But that file size is 30 meg. And if you went back and looked at RU16 the previous month before they had 2 or 3 changes, it's also 30 meg. And the one before that was 30 meg. Because we've gotten to this interesting phenomenon where because it's an aggregated package and a delta between a common baseline, we're revving all of the common binaries inside of that package. So what you're actually doing when you're taking that one change is still churning through the core binaries that represent Exchange. And so it's not the best position to be in. But certainly it is supported and it works. The other principle that is absolutely essential is in order for you to get the best servicing experience from Microsoft and Exchange, we really need you to stay current for 2 reasons. First of all, because we're running so fast in the service and we're running so fast in our own quarterly cadence that we've committed to, we can't defy the laws of space and time. And so we have to pick and choose what we validate. And so we're going to emphasize and focus on the current products that are coming out. If you're running something that's 2 years old, 3 years old, you're not going to get the level of attention to that change in that environment. You're also, for the second reason, not going to get the support for us changing that. The Exchange team is very happy to go through and introduce a change of code for something that is very recent, because based upon a customer demand. But if it's a customer who's running something 2 years old and they're wanting us to put the latest capabilities in that product, it's kind of like buying a car and then 5 years going to that dealer and asking them, I want the latest sat nav in my car.
Right.
That's 5 years old. And it doesn't always work. So keeping current really is absolutely important.
And it's really different. You know, I know a lot of you have had the experience with Outlook where you said, okay, there's a new version of Outlook. It has some feature in it that I want to use in my existing environment. Can Microsoft backport it? And sometimes the answer is yes. We saw that happen with support for personal archives in older versions of Outlook. The difference is that when you're talking about doing that on the server, the number of things that you have to test and the size of the test matrix just blows up as soon as you start talking about taking feature changes from the current version and moving them backwards. Remember when Brent earlier was talking about how developer A will make a change, developer B will make a change, then this test infrastructure is used to make sure that those two changes are not butting heads. We'll multiply that by now having to go back and retest this feature change, which introduces new behavior, against several previous versions, and you see there's just not enough time to do that, right? So I've heard customers say to my face, well, you know, Microsoft could do this if they wanted to. Okay, that's true, they could. But for every minute that Microsoft is spending porting a new feature from, you know, Exchange 2013 CU9 back to Exchange 2010 SP3, what, RU10? RU10, okay. For every minute they're spending doing that, that's another minute that they can't spend doing something else fundamental, right? Because there are only, you know, even Microsoft, there are only so many engineering man hours in the day, and there are only so many days on the calendar. So, although Brent is, you know, being polite and not saying it, the discussions about what gets backported can be ruthless, right? Because there are some very forceful customer advocates inside Microsoft that will stamp and pound the table and say, no, damn it, my customer needs this fix. And there are equally staunch people on the engineering side who say, okay, great. Tell me which of these other 17 things your customer needs you don't want me to do because you can't have both, right? So there's an ongoing, if I say tension, it sounds bad, but there's an ongoing...
Tension's the right word.
Yeah, it's tension in the engineering sense, like pulling on both ends of the rope, not tension like, oh my God, I'm so tense, you know, I need to drink. But tension in the sense of there's a pull between these two different things, like a tug of war. And, you know, in a tug of war, sometimes the flag is right in the middle, sometimes it's over here, sometimes it's over here, right? And that continually goes on throughout every one of these release discussions.
Yeah, no, tension is the right word. Ask my wife. So this is the thought process that we go through. Paul's dead on. But, you know, when it comes to actually issuing the service, the updates, you know, we've created quite a bit of an alphabet soup. You know, there was a drone that could be heard very succinctly in Redmond when we announced cumulative updates from multiple people, both inside the company and outside the company. But it really reflects our improved understanding and responsiveness to customers. You know, we don't go out there and dream up new ways that we can impose pain on customers. We're really actually very reactive to customer feedback and trying to do what customers are asking us for. So I thought, you know, people ask me, you know, why do you have so many types of updates? So let's quickly go through here why we did. And let's go back and remember what it was like in Exchange 2003 when we had just service packs and hotfixes. It was great, right? No, it wasn't.
No.
It was not great. Hotfixes, you know, so 2003 was a product that was built on C and C++ technology. And it was a collection of DLLs that, you know, were dynamically loaded inside the product and provided functionality. And what we found happened there is, you know, as we would get requests from customers to fix things, we'd fix a particular DLL. And then, you know, DLL-A would be fixed, and then, you know, another fix would be put into DLL-B, and then DLL-C, and then lo and behold, we'd have to go back and readdress a fix in DLL-A. And so what ended up happening is you had these collisions of overlapping versions of DLLs, and so a lot of time was spent inside of engineering and inside of support figuring out what are the dependencies and what are the actual versions that I need to get to address a particular issue. And we learned from that. So when we embarked upon Exchange Server 2007, in addition to changing from predominantly C and C++ code base to a C# code base when we shifted to being built on top of .NET frameworks, we shifted our servicing strategy to what we called the update rollups. And this is where those MSPs that I talked about earlier started to come into play. The goal here was to give customers a comprehensive package at regular intervals that they could apply in one fell swoop and make certain that their server was always up to date. And by and large, you know, the transition went fairly smoothly, and it was regarded by customers. But, you know, we didn't solve the problem of having multiple updates, you know, against a particular service pack baseline. But by and large, customers are happy. Enter Exchange Server 2010 and the service. Service packs and update rollups remained. The mechanisms were exactly the same. But then we also introduced this concept of O365 Evergreen, where you have this continuous iteration of builds through the service for validation. And so, we opted to not change it, but it did cause us to think about the model very heavily. Enter Exchange Server 2013, when we introduced the concept of cumulative updates, which was really intended to address the learnings that we had gotten from the service in terms of what it means to run a homogenistic Exchange environment where you have consistent versions of software deployed and get predictable patterns at large scale. We also introduced, based upon customer demand, dedicated security updates. The one big piece of feedback that we did get in 2010 is, when we started having to patch a certain third-party dependency that we took inside of the product for transcoding due to exploits that were in their environment, is that we, for the first time, were faced with having to ship a large number of roll-up updates that were actually classified as security updates. And customers, there was a battle cry that said, I want the security fix, but I need to validate the other 31 fixes that are in that 32 fix package, and I can't take it. You're forcing me to take it too quickly. Or my WSUS server just downloaded this because it was rated as critical because it's a security update, and I just broke my Exchange server because you reconfigured something for me. And it was not ideal, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it.
Yeah. So we took that to heart, and in 2013, we made the commitment to give you dedicated security updates and delivered upon it.
So I just want to ask a quick question for context. How many of you also administer Lync or SharePoint in your environments? Okay. It'd be a great bar discussion to ask what you like about the Lync and SharePoint update models compared to Exchange, because in general, when I talk to people, the way that Lync and SharePoint do their updates is very different from Exchange, and I find very few Exchange people who think that these other ways of shipping updates are better. Right? The idea of having to go back and apply multiple concurrent patches to an enterprise server product, Exchange doesn't do that anymore. I think that what you'll look at, or what you'll see when Brent talks about this looking back in retrospect slide at what we learned from 2013, I think one of the things we learned is that the best way to make sure that you can cleanly get up to the current version is to stick with this notion of having a cumulative update that lays down all the fixes so that no matter where you are, when you apply the latest CU, you're getting the latest bits for all those components, instead of having to say, well, let's see, I need the November 2014 CU for this one piece, and then I need this other patch for this other piece, and there's a client update that changes everything about the way the client looks. Not that I'm picking on any particular product, Skype. Raise your hand if you were surprised. Anyway, there are other ways to do it, but I think Brent is right when he says that after a lot of reflection and a lot of customer feedback, this is as good as it gets in terms of making sure that all of the server components get updated in a timely way without breaking anything or leaving any lingering shrapnel around.
Yeah, I see some heads nodding, so I think we're not alone in this regard.
Yeah, well,
which I'll walk out of here with my head just a little higher.
Until the Skype guys come up behind you and hit you in the head.
Exactly. Well, I do meet with them regularly, and we're kind of friendly right now. So maybe I can sway them a little bit.
Yeah, just blame it on me.
No. The servicing model for 2013, we tried some bold new things, and I'm happy to report that from our perspective, we've achieved a lot of those goals. First and foremost, having a single code base that we used for the server and service was absolutely the best thing that we did for many reasons. It gave us the validation. It gave us the assuredness that we could enter into hybrid deployments with customers. It gave us validation and visibility into the code that we had never seen before. And if I'm being perfectly honest, if I go back and look at the relative amount of change volumes and customer escalations that we've gotten in 2013 compared to what we gotten in 2010 and 2007 at the same time, 2013 is far lower. And it's a direct result of that rapid innovation and change that we've gotten from having a single code base. It's also allowed me to go to the engineering team and fight for customer requested fixes in the product in a much more easy fashion, because they only have to fix it in one place, and they're going to fix it inside of the service as well. So we both have skin in the game. So it's absolutely a great thing. I already mentioned the hybrid deployment being absolutely critical. Imagine what would happen if you were a customer who's using Exchange Online Archiving, which is running Exchange in our cloud, and you're running Exchange Server on premise, and you have a mismatch in the versions, and you start losing data. That would be a horrific situation. But it is that requirement that has caused us to also impress upon customers the requirement to keep current, and why we have an aggressive CU support strategy so that we can cover these scenarios. I already mentioned we deliver the dedicated security updates. That has landed very well with customers. It's not been without some trade-offs because of that mechanism of MSI and MSP that we use, and because the security update comes out as an MSP, I now have a little bit less flexibility in being able to backport and put fixes into previous branches, and I really have to lock that down just for security updates. And so that's why, if you have the occasion to escalate a case to customer support requesting, for a particular fix, the response will be quite frequently, well, it's fixed in the next CU, and you have to go forward to that CU. Whereas, in the past, you might have been able to get a backport for it. But that's a direct result of the dedicated security updates. In terms of how we executed, we set out to deploy O365 weekly. We actually achieved that. We got that quick churn, that quick return on investment. We said we were going to do cumulative updates, and we did that. We executed fairly cleanly, getting code fixes out there. There were a couple hiccups along the way. I'll be the first to admit it, but all things new. I'm happy to report that we worked through them. But an interesting thing along the road here happened. For our customers who were accustomed to running Exchange, we started hearing this question of, well, when is SP1 coming out? And if you remember the infamous cumulative update blog that I wrote, 24 months ago, we didn't say there wouldn't be service packs, but we didn't say there would be, because we were kind of on the fence at the time. We wanted to keep our options open. But in response to customer requests, we recognized that there was this sense of completeness of the product that is achieved only once you hit Service Pack 1. So we released a Service Pack 1. But what did we do after that? We went right back onto our quarterly cadence and started shipping CUs again, CU5, CU6, CU7, CU8. And it's all is well and good. Customers are happy. But we've created a little bit of a challenge for ourselves now. Because of the dedicated security updates and because of the MSP patching, the only type of fix I can give you in that SP1 timeframe on that SP1 build is a security update. So for the next 9 years, and yes, that sounds like a long time, but that's what lifecycle policy says I have to adhere to, I can only ship security updates on SP1. If you call today and you want a fix for Exchange Server 2013, you have to get off of SP1 and go to the future CU, because I have no mechanism to put that back in the product. So an interesting side effect of what we had, but nevertheless something that we're working through with customers. Our messaging was at SP1. We knew this was going to be a problem, and we said that you were only going to get security updates, but we probably could have been a little bit more explicit with that messaging. So that's something that we'll improve upon, hopefully, with future releases. But we still get the question, why cumulative updates? And Paul already went through it. They are a simpler deployment. It is a much cleaner approach. An interesting thing happens if you analyze what customers have done. And so I put a chart here with Service Pack downloads from 2010. And there was a kind of an alarming thing that we discovered. The light blue shaded area of the portion there represents the entire life cycle of SP1 downloads for 2010. And the thing that jumped here that really caused alarm for me was that 4 years in, customers are still downloading SP1. I hope with every ounce of my being that they are not deploying SP1 because they're having a horrible experience. Not because it's a bad product, but because they're not getting the benefit of all the innovation and the improvements that we've made. What I'm hoping is happening here is that customers don't understand our servicing model. And I'm afraid that they're actually deploying RTM and then layering SP1 on top of it, and SP2 on top of that, and SP3 on top of that. Because other products, that's the way they do it. Right? It's not been our approach. Our approach was always that you could go straight to the Service Pack revision because we recognize the value of cumulative updates and cumulative software. And so when we proposed the 2013 servicing model, we really wanted to break away from this, but marketing wouldn't let me kill Service Packs. But stay tuned. The other reason we think cumulative updates are better is because it reduces the overall number of type of updates that you have to deal with. I frequently get the question, I need the latest version of Exchange. How do I get it? And my answer is go to the download center and download it and install it. Done. Now, could it be easier to find what the most recent cumulative update is? Yes. And we're looking at ways to improve upon that. But my answer is simple. Just last week, the Skype for Business team, since you were picking on Skype today, sorry, Nick, they said, I need to dog food the latest version of Exchange with Skype for Business because we're releasing this month. I said, okay, go download CU8 from the download center and have fun. He goes, I need a license queue. I said, no, you don't. I said, just go download it and install it and it'll be fine. And guess what? I never heard from him again until he said, yep, validation was great. That's efficiency. We also think that cumulative updates fit with the enterprise deployment practice really, really well. Most mature organizations today have an imaging program where they go out and they build their classic OS image. Then they have an application installation step that they put on top of it. If you want to install an Exchange server, I'm oversimplifying, I realize, lay down your image, download the latest cumulative update, install it. In an hour and a half, you've got an Exchange server up and running. So we believe that it fits well with that paradigm and how customers actually run it. But the other key, I think my battery died. Whoops, no, there we go. The other key thing that we get is a deterministic deployment and a loss of configuration drift. When you start layering packages and modifying web.configs and copying OA text files inside of an RU update script or things like that, things can go sideways. Software is an imperfect system still, as much as we try to make it be so. And so, the fewer moving parts we have in it, the more successful you're going to be.
That's especially true as the number of servers you manage go up. If you only have one Exchange server, configuration drift is not typically a huge problem. If you have 2, if you have 20, if you have 200, if you have 500 or 1,000, the more servers you have, the more likelihood you're going to find at least one of them that something didn't quite go right. And it's now configured differently than what you intended or differently from the other ones. So having a cumulative update, almost as a refresh, helps eliminate that problem, or at least reduce it.
So I know that you've all come here, interested in Exchange Server 2016. So I thought I would take the approach to give you a little bit of a preview of what we're thinking around how we're going to service Exchange Server 2016. Now, I have to caveat this. They didn't make me put up the big disclaimer slide. This is not baked policy yet, but this is about the next best thing that you can get at this point.
It may not be baked policy, but he's the baker. Okay,
Yeah.
so keep that in mind. This is subject to change,
Yeah.
but what Brenda's going to tell you represents the team's best thinking right now about the best way for customers to deploy these changes or to service Exchange.
Right. So first and foremost, it's time for service packs to die. Our plan right now is cumulative updates and security update packages only. We're going to double down and say that we've made the right strategy here. We'll continue to get you a regular cadence of an update package that you can deploy to get the latest version of Exchange, and we'll make a commitment to provide security updates on that as well. Does anybody think that's a good idea? Okay, good. That's worth a shirt. In terms of cadence, the way what we're thinking about doing here is the first 4 cumulative updates 1 through 4, will be in sync with O365 Evergreen. What does that mean? That means the code will be continuing to evolve. It will be a great time to get your DCRs and your customer feedback into it, because we'll have the ability to validate it inside of O365 as well as inside of our on-premise validation pipeline. After that, post-cumulative update 4, we're going to slow things down a bit. We're going to say this is the time that customers who want a stable environment and a mission-critical messaging platform that they can rely on, they only want security updates and truly, truly critical defects fixed in their product. So we're actually going to slow the train down a little bit, decouple it from O365 slightly, such that you're no longer subject to the feature churn that goes into O365. So what might this look like if I were to do my animations? I love PowerPoint animations because it gives me something to do when I'm not dealing with the tension of servicing needs. O365 will stay on that weekly cadence. We'll adopt the quarterly release cadence up until CU4. You can expect to see new features light up. You can expect there to be innovation within the product. You can also expect to be able to download it and put it into your own labs and play with it, which I think is absolutely critical. And I would encourage all of you to do it. If you're not ready to make that purchase commitment when we RTW, don't let that stop you from understanding what the product is capable of doing and providing feedback on it. What happens there, though, is what happens next is a little interesting. O365 will continue on. We've made that commitment. We're not getting off that train. There'll be weekly deployments. We'll continue that innovation and that frequent change cycle again, and the product will continue to advance. But for our on-premises product, or our server product, we're going to establish what's called a long-term servicing branch, and we're going to actually take the code off and separate it out from O365. Less change, possibly a slower release cadence. We're still evaluating what the release cadence would look like, but still no less of a change. CU5, CU6, CU7, characterized with any necessary security updates, as well as critical bug fixes inside of the product. So what are some other characteristics of that long-term servicing branch? And if you've been to any of the Windows talks, you're probably starting to hear them talk about this concept as well. So we're not the only ones that are doing this. First and foremost, long-term servicing branch is designed to align with enterprise adoption cycles. We think that around the 15-month time frame after release is the time when customers are really ready to jump on board with the product. You know, that is that traditional SP1 bump. And in fact, I have data to show that. The graph that I'm showing you here is the customer adoption of Exchange Server as a function of support requests. Why support requests? Because they are our best indicator of what our customers are doing with our product. And it doesn't matter whether this graph is 2010, 2007, 2003, we see the exact same phenomenon with every version. Once we RTW or RTM the product, we have this period of basal activity where there's interest and people start deploying it and we get support requests. But about 12 to 15 months in, depending on the particular product, we see this huge hockey stick jump where support requests go through the roof and then they flatline and stay at a constant level. And that's always corresponded to the SP1 bump. So effectively what we're doing is we're saying we're publicly saying that there won't be a service pack, but we're still going to keep that same cadence that you've become accustomed to, but ask you to get on board the cumulative update train in servicing so that you have the best possible experience with the product. That's what the long-term servicing branch is designed to provide. But you're probably saying to yourself, but Brent, you did all of this work and leveraged all the O365 work to prove out the product. None of that changes. Our commitment will be that any changes that make it into the long-term servicing branch will first be validated in O365. What will happen is our developers will have to take an extra hop to get it back into the shipping product. Nor will we change the validation pipeline that we use for our on-premises product. Once it's been validated in O365, it'll still be validated through our TAP programs. It'll still be validated in our own dog food environments. So everything that we're doing today will continue, and we'll continue to leverage that. But we'll do it in a way that controls the amount of risk that you as individual customers of the on-premises product are absorbing each time you go to deploy it. So we think it's a good thing. We will still provide the commitment to give you security updates as needed and a cumulative cadence. I'm not at liberty today to say what we're thinking about the cumulative cadence because we've heard from customers that some like the current cadence, some want it faster, some want it slower. So we're not prepared to make a statement on that. And the reason being is it's actually a hard question for us to answer. If you're the customer who's sitting there waiting for the next cumulative update because there's a critical fix and you need it, you want it faster. But if you're the customer who's risk adverse and you don't want change, you want it to come more slowly. Cumulative update is the strategy. Security updates are the strategy. We have to make certain that we hit that happy medium that addresses all of our customer needs. Anybody think this is a good plan? Okay. Another shirt.
One of the things about the long-term servicing branch that I like from a serviceability perspective, sort of from the MVP end of things, is that it gives customers who have very strong configuration management processes something predictable, right? If you work for a bank, an insurance company, an airline, some types of government agencies. These folks tend to have really muscular configuration control, and it takes them a long time to do things, in part because, as Brent says, they're risk averse, but also in part because these organizations tend to be large, they're geographically distributed, they're not always centralized, and so it may take them as long as a year or even more to approve release of something like a cumulative update for Exchange. Well, the beauty of it is, with the long-term servicing branch now, folks like that are getting a stable, predictable cadence of releases, but they also know they're only getting the things they really need. They're never going to go through the process of getting a release approved, going through the test cycle for something that's not actually a critical fix. So the rate of arrival of changes is getting turned way down in the long-term servicing branch. So for people who want something stable, predictable, white picket fence house in the suburbs, we have that. For people who want the latest, brand new, as soon as it's available, we have that in the service, right? So both sets of customers are able to get what they need.
And of course, we're still going to ask you to stay current, as I said. So let's kind of shift gears again here and talk about how changes get incorporated into the product. When a customer has a problem, Microsoft wants to be responsive. We want to make certain that we address that as quickly as possible for the customer. And so, not surprisingly, we have a fairly standardized way of doing so. In engineering speak, a customer problem is a customer escalation. And every customer escalation starts with inside the customer's environment. Now, we have multiple ways that customers can report things to us. They can open up a phone ticket with CSS. They can open up a web ticket submission if they have Premier services. You can work through your Premier portal. We have many, many avenues to get feedback to us. The one avenue that I'm going to ask you to try not to use is the Exchange blog. The Exchange blog, while it's great feedback to us, and we actually do monitor it every day, and want to be responsive to it. It's a great indicator for if something is going wrong, say if a CU needs to be recalled. It's not a great vehicle for individual support cases, and so I'm going to ask you to not attempt to use it for that. That's the one thing it's not good for. But we have many other avenues. Your support ticket, once you've opened it, is going to land in a support engineer's queue. And these are the first and best defense for all issues related to Exchange. 90% of our cases are resolved at this level because it may not be a code defect. It may actually just be that the customer needs guidance, or they've hit a particular problem, or there's already a known fix, a known issue that we've already addressed, and it just wasn't discoverable to the customer. And so they call support and they find out about it. The support engineer manages your case, manages all your customer comms. They are your lifeblood. But if they can't resolve it, what happens from there is it gets escalated up to an escalation engineer. And these are people who have technical specialties in particular areas. Whereas a support engineer may be a little bit more broad across the Exchange product as a whole, an escalation engineer is probably going to focus in on a particular aspect of Exchange, say transport. They have code level access. They have the same level of they have read level access to the code that our engineers are writing on. So they can actually go in and do debugging. They can actually do code inspection to find out if there really is something to this customer escalation. If, in fact, they find that there is a defect, they actually have the ability to report it up to product engineering, where I sit with all the other engineers, where we get into even a deeper level of expertise. Something that was possibly a transport issue at an escalation engineer could translate into a DLP problem inside of the transport team. And in order to make certain that we're fair and equal to all of our customers and all of our customer requests, we have a standardized scoring process that we use to equate the criticality, the severity, and the opportunity for that fix to make it into the product. And so the things that we're looking at, the hows, are what is the customer impact that this is having, and we score it 0 through 4. What is the possibility that other customers are going to be having this? So what is the applicability to the customer install base as a whole? Again, the 0 through 4 score. Is there a reasonable workaround that can be implemented without having to take a code fix? Because every time we take a code fix, we introduce risk to the code base. It's an interesting conundrum that we're in. We want to be responsive. We want to fix your issues, but because of the sheer complexity, the sheer volume of the code, and the ecosystem in which we live, we have to be cognizant and be realistic and acknowledge that there is a risk that we might break our own product in a way that we didn't intend. Or we might break a third-party product in a way that we didn't intend, which is even worse. Because we've got this very rich ecosystem of these customers who depend upon us to provide a stable platform. So it's not a simple black and white. We actually take these decisions very, very seriously and follow a prescriptive way of evaluating them. Based upon the information provided from the engineer, we get an initial score. If that score indicates that it is of sufficient severity that we think the product engineering team needs to look at it more deeply, we then go in and have that risk and complexity conversation. An engineer will actually go in and do the code inspection. The escalation engineer may have provided a possible solution to the code, or they may have just said, here's the problem, I'm at my wit's end, go fix it. But we will actually spend time, whether without any commitment to doing the fix, we'll actually ask an engineer to look at the code and to engineer a possible solution. And then it will be evaluated based on risk and score. And what comes out of this algorithm is a fix won't fix decision. And it's a simple number, right? Within a particular range, it gets fixed, and within a particular range, it doesn't get fixed. But it's consistent, so that we make certain that every customer is treated fairly. So, congratulations, you scored out, your fix is going to be made. What can you expect next? Well, with a normal priority fix, you can expect that to be delivered in a future CU. Remember I said because of dedicated security updates, I can't go back and patch easily a previous version because I violate my commitment to giving you security fixes only and no bug fixes. So right out of the gate, it's a future fix. It will be scheduled according to our available resources and other work items that are in queue in that particular engineering team. Our goal is to get it within that quarter. So, I'd like to try to commit to, if you open a case today, it's going to be fixed in the next quarterly CU. Depending on where we are in that cycle, I may or may not be able to achieve that. But it's always the goal. It's going to get validated through the release pipeline fully, the entire release pipeline, starting from that focus job all the way through the end of the worldwide deployment in the service and the corp deployment inside of Microsoft and inside of TAP environments. That is the commitment. That is how we've changed our engineering system so that we're getting as much validation before it gets in your hands as possible. We're going to update knowledge bases and we're going to do product documentation. You're saying, but wait a minute, Brent, what happens if my system is down and when I escalate this to you? Well, obviously we have a critical on demand process or a crit-sit process where we can be extremely responsive. We can get a fix out to you in under 24 hours typically if you're in a true business down situation, because that is no situation that we ever want a customer to be in. But realize there's a trade-off here. If you're getting one of these fixes, you're very early on in that validation pipeline. You're at the stage of the focus developer where we have only made the commitment that we have addressed the problem and we haven't broken that component further. I make no guarantee for the rest of the product. And so if you find yourself in the situation where you really, really think you need a fix, I want you to keep this in mind because, and the support engineer should have a very deliberate conversation with you to make certain that you understand the risk that you're taking on. Now, we're not going to let you go into a situation where we think we're going to put you at further risk if you're already in a bad situation. But I don't want you to think that just because Microsoft has produced a fix very quickly for me, that it has gone through that entire validation pipeline and has been fully regressed, because it's not the contract that we have right now.
The way to think about the crit-sit fixes are when you have a serious illness. Your doctor is going to try to figure out the best course of action to help you get better as quickly as possible, but some courses of action are more risky than others. So your doctor is not immediately going to say, well, I think I'm going to have to cut your arm off. It may get to the point where the best thing for you is, in fact, to cut your arm off. But you're going to be, at least hopefully, well advised ahead of time of what the possible outcomes are and the risk that you're taking with any given course of treatment. Of course, the corollary to that is people who self-diagnose using Dr. Bing or Dr. Google and say, oh, I read about my symptoms on the internet, this is what's wrong. The good news is we're not really subject to that in the Exchange world because you can't create your own fixes, right? You can, however, come up with workarounds that sometimes, end up with a cure being worse than the disease. Right? I think many of us have probably experienced that at different points in our messaging careers.
From time to time, the scoring algorithm comes out and says, that the risk is too great or the complexity is too great and we can't do the fix. What options do you have then? Well, if you get through the conversation with your support engineer that your fix is not going to be pursued, they actually have the ability to appeal that decision to my team. They can come in and they can say, well, the escalation that we sent to you At the time, we didn't realize the entire customer's justification for what they needed, what the impact of their business was. Would you reevaluate it? The answer is yes. At the end of the day, I want to do the right thing for customers, no matter what work it means. Maybe there's additional customers who have started to report the issue as well. That's another reason we would do a reevaluation of it. And quite often, the appeal ends right here. We reverse the decision and we schedule the fix. But every now and then, even that doesn't work because the risk is just too great, or the complexity of the solution is going to put too many people at risk. And believe it or not, we do get into this situation. But there's still an appeal process at this point, and it's called Get Help. And now this is where, if you have a premier service contract or you have an account team that works for you, they become your advocates. And what happens in this is there's actually a senior level escalation to senior management inside of Exchange to evaluate whether or not the process that I've put in place and all of the work that we've already done up until this point was executed fairly and accurately. And sometimes there is a little bit of emotion in there. But it ultimately comes down to where our senior management tells us, yes, you made the right call, or no, you didn't. And a decision is either reversed or not reversed. So all of these things are available. These things happen automatically. And your support teams and your account teams are very familiar with how this process works. And with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let Paul talk about what is Exchange Support, because I've left him a whopping 5 minutes.
That's plenty. Support is good. It's what we all want, right? So from an Exchange standpoint, when we talk about what it means for something to be supported, the kinds of questions that I hear from people are listed here. This is obviously not exhaustive. It's not every question I've ever been asked about support, but it's a pretty good start. So when somebody says, is something supported, what they might actually mean is, does it work? Did Microsoft test it to see whether it works? Can I operate like this? There may be things that Microsoft tested and said, well, this didn't really work, and it'll work for a short while, but it's not a good long-term supportable state to be in. I think a great example of this are the kinds of experiments that people have done with various hypervisors in the past before hypervisor technology got to the point where it was usable, supportable for Exchange. Or those of you who remember SAN-based hardware replication back in the bad old days when it had to be synchronous. It's a great example of something, you can do it. It's not necessarily reliable or safe, and thus it wouldn't be considered supported. Can somebody help me with it if I have problems? A big part of support is this support infrastructure that Brent was talking about. And by the way, I want to put in a plug. The Exchange PSS or CSS team does a session with a panel of support folks, Scott Landry, Jen, I think Tim is going to be here, where they talk about top support issues that they see in Exchange. Great stuff. I strongly encourage you to attend it tomorrow if you have time in your schedule. It'll be well worth it. So can I get help when I need it? And then lastly, this technology archaeology line is kind of a throwaway. It ties back to what Brent was talking about earlier. If you have an old version of Exchange, then it will not necessarily be supported in the way that you think. Right? I'm going to talk specifically about what that means in a minute. So I like to use this cause and effect of just because doesn't mean. So just because Microsoft doesn't say that something is or is not supported, just because Microsoft doesn't come out and say it is unsupported, and this is my personal favorite, just because some random dude on the internet did it and said it worked, that does not mean it's supported, right? You will find people who will say on the internet, well, I set this up in my lab and it worked great, and so therefore I think it's a good idea to use AddCEdit to edit this parameter to make some change, okay? Well, this gets back to what I was talking about earlier. There are things that work, there are things that Microsoft tested, and there are things that are supported. So we take a look at what that means. The first thing you need to know about what supported means is that Microsoft tested it and they verified whether or not it works. If they didn't test it, by definition, it isn't supported. If they tested it and found, oh, I'll be damned, this doesn't work, it's not supported. You're never going to see Microsoft say, we support something that we know doesn't work. Right? That is not at all what happens. So Brent came up with this cool diagram. My original diagram was drawn with paper, and I took a picture of it and put it in the slide deck, but the slide overlords didn't like that, so Brent cleaned it up for me. This is what we're talking about. We have a doesn't work bubble, we have a works bubble, and then a tested bubble. There's some things that Microsoft tests, and they say, oh, I'll be damned. That does not work. Don't do that. There are other things that they test that work, and the intersection between tested and works, where those two join up, that's what it means to be supported. So if something doesn't work, part of the support experience is figuring out, okay, if this doesn't work, should it work? And if it should work, is it supported? And can I therefore expect Microsoft to give me support and help? Brent has been talking a lot about servicing and the servicing model. But what supported means in the context of that servicing model is that Microsoft can help you both by giving you advice, but also by putting your problem into that escalation workflow that he talked about. Suppose I came in and I called PSS or CSS and I said, dude, I've got an Exchange 2000 server and I can't mount my database. Okay, would that be supported? Okay, so careful. It used to work, right? It was a supported configuration at one time, but because it's not in the product lifecycle any longer, that product is old and gone, like Windows XP, like Windows Server 2003, pour one out for your dead homies. These products are not supported any longer. That does not mean that the CSS engineer, out of the goodness of her heart, may not try to help me from back in the day when she used to work that support queue and she remembers something related to my problem. But it does mean that Microsoft is not obligated to provide support for that product. If it's not a Microsoft product or Microsoft solution, Microsoft isn't going to support it. So when you have some janky piece of software that you downloaded from the internet because some random dude said it works with Exchange and it doesn't work, and then it corrupts your database, Microsoft will help you fix the database, but they're not going to help you fix the janky software so that it doesn't do it again in the future. By the way, if you're not reading the Exchange blog, I strongly encourage you to go back and look at the article last week about how we support, or what support looks like for databases that have been repaired. The watchword now is evacuate the database. So go read Tim's article. Well worth your time. The other thing that supported means is that what Microsoft does to support a product changes over time. So suppose that you have a Exchange server, it's working great, and Microsoft ships a new release of the .NET Framework version that Exchange uses. So they go from, I don't know, .NET 4.5 SP2 to SP3. And you install it, and then something doesn't work. That's supported. The Exchange team didn't make that change. They don't own that code, but they still own the contract of we will support our product when it is running with supported or supportable versions of the prerequisites. Now, this last one is the one that I really, really like because it gets to the heart of what Brent was talking about a minute ago. A customer does something that Microsoft didn't expect, but that should be supported. How many of you use public folders? Okay, then you know what I'm talking about. There are all kinds of configurations and topologies that Microsoft doesn't run internally because they're Microsoft. They have specific things that they do to support their specific business operations. Your business operations may be completely different. So you may be doing things that should work, but that Microsoft didn't know any customer was actually doing. I had a customer once who was running Exchange over satellite links, and they had one Exchange server on every one of their oil drilling platforms. Well, guess what?
Who that customer is.
The product team didn't think about that when they were designing the product. It should work, but there were some adjustments that needed to be made, and those guys were able to get support to help solve the problems that they were having. Because Microsoft, as smart as they are and as much effort as they put into this, they can't anticipate every single thing that every single customer might ever do with the product. So when we talk about what support ed means, what does it mean for Microsoft to give you support? The real thing that I want you to take away from this slide is this bottom thing. Microsoft will support you, but that doesn't guarantee that they can fix your specific problem. Because the problem may be something in your environment. It may be something in the product that Microsoft didn't anticipate and can't fix because the cure is worse than the disease. It may be that they can't fix it within the time frame when you think it needs to be fixed. But this escalation process is intended to make a fair, repeatable, objectively judged decision about whether or not Microsoft is able to fix your problem. Okay, but it has to be said, there is no guarantee when you call CSS and say, hey, I'm having this problem with Exchange. You know what the outcome may be? I'm really sorry that you're having 99 problems, but Exchange is now one of them because we're not going to fix this. that can happen. And I don't want to sugarcoat it and pretend like Microsoft will commit to fix every single thing that you ever see. Now, for those of you who've seen The Lion King, it's time to talk about the circle of life. Every product has one. Right? Microsoft does not guarantee perpetual support for any of their products. And you all know what that looks like for Windows on the desktop, Windows on the server. Many of you have had versions of Exchange that you have run out to the end of it, that version's life cycle. So in general, the standard that you should plan on is 10 years from the date that product RTMs. That's a little flexible. Microsoft has made exceptions in the past for certain products, but you can't count on them doing that in the future because things change in the industry. Customers deploy versions at different speeds and whatnot. That's why the long-term servicing branch, because you can deploy LTSB and you can know that there will be minimal changes to the code in that branch throughout the entirety of the life cycle. So once you get your Exchange environment the way that you like it, with the functionality you like, and you move to LTSB, that means you're going to have very low volatility in your environment from that point forward. And there are many customers for whom low volatility has the same sound as free ice cream or here's a check. They want a very predictable environment that has as few changes as possible, and that's what LTSB is intended to deliver. Now, supposing, just hypothetically, that some of you have old versions of software in your environment that you know are out of lifecycle support, and you've kind of been thinking about upgrading them, it is never too late. You can always come back into the light. You can always come back into the tent and join the inner circle and get supported again. Keep in mind that the process of moving from version X to whatever the current version is may require some upheaval. If you had Exchange 2003 still in production and you wanted to move to Exchange 2013, you certainly can do that. But it's not as straightforward as moving from 2007 or 2010 to 2013. And you have to factor that into your planning about when you decide to get off a version. I generally like to see people moving away from versions before they trip out the end of their life cycle. That's not always possible. Having said that, just because you're not in the support lifecycle, that doesn't mean Microsoft won't help you. I just had a customer. They launch rockets. For some reason, they thought it was a good idea to have Exchange 2007 SP1 in their environment. I guess, nobody ever told them there was an SP3, maybe. I'm not really sure what was going on with that. But they wanted to move forward and deploy Exchange 2013. So during decommissioning some of their servers, we ran into a problem, and I called CSS and filed a ticket. And the CSS folks said, well, this version is not in its support lifecycle, but we will try to help you. So they were able to do some diagnostic work to help us pinpoint the root cause. We fixed the root cause, solved the problem. Does that happen every time? No. Okay. Does a good guy always get the girl? No. Does the right team always win? No. Any Cubs fans? No. Right? You know how that works. So they'll help you with versions that are not supported, but sometimes that help is in the form of tough love, saying, oh, really? So you're on Exchange 2013 RTM. Well, guess what? The problem that you're having is fixed in Cumulative Update 6. So if you want to fix this problem, you have to upgrade. That may not be what you want to hear, but that counts as support, right? Support is telling you, here's how to fix your problem. Get on a more current version. The key thing to keep in mind is that most of the time, when Microsoft puts a feature into a cumulative update, that feature is never going to be backported, unless there's extraordinary customer demand or there's something exceptional that means that they need to backport it for customer sat reasons or deployment blocker reasons. But bug fixes or defect fixes will sometimes be backported using a set of criteria that, Brent, you're welcome to talk about those in more depth if you want to, but you can't count on it. What you can count on is that the versions that Microsoft says are supported are going to give you all of the current fixes in the source tree as of the time that you deploy that version. Now, I've talked a lot about support, and what it means to be supported. I want to disambiguate two things that sometimes get confused in discussions of this process. One is that support really, that's help from Microsoft. Something's broken and they help you fix it. Something is not working right and because the environment has changed and you call CSS and they walk you through diagnostics to help you identify what change broke your environment, root cause analysis, recommendations to get on a specific version to address a specific issue. Those are all support activities that you have access to. Patching is something that only Microsoft can do. Support is something that you can get from an MVP, you can get from a user group, you can get from some random dude on the internet who may be able to help you fix what's broken. But patching is something that Brent and his team do, and they're the only people who can do it. That's a software change that comes from Microsoft that resolves some issue that you're having. You can see how those two go hand in hand. You can have support without patching, and you can have patching without support. Right? Microsoft can release patches, and you can install those patches in faith that they're going to prevent you from having problems that you may not have had yet. That's totally legit. It's exactly like taking aspirin to keep heart disease from being a problem. Right? There is very sound evidence that if you visit Dr. Brent and take his recommended patch set, your Exchange environment will be healthier than if you wait until something breaks and then try to catch up and rapid patch. Brent and I, when we were preparing this deck, we talked a lot about time zone updates. Right? That's something that Microsoft has no control over because local governments all around the world are free to say, oh, so our time zone on May 5th, we're going to move the clocks 22 minutes ahead. Well, guess what? When that happens, Brent drives into the office and starts cracking the whip. Okay, that's a great example of something. I can't write time zone patches for Exchange. I mean, I wish I could. I'm sure that would be a nice little business sideline for me, but I'm not able to do that. So patches for time zone issues, patches for security issues, those are all things that only are going to come from the mothership. But keep in mind that issuing and building and releasing these patches, making sure that they're tested, making sure that they're available, that's only one piece of the support lifecycle. There are a lot of other activities that are available to you that you can both you can pitch and catch. You can support people by participating in the TechNet forums, for example. When somebody says, oh, I'm having this problem, and you've had the same problem, and you say, oh yeah, I had that same problem, and I installed this fix, or I made this configuration change, and that solved the problem. That is you providing support, just as you might otherwise receive it, but there's only one place to get patches. So, what do we want you to do? Take it away, Brent.
Thanks. So wrapping up here quickly, sorry for running over. Start your Exchange Server 2016 planning early. We're going to be releasing a preview build later this summer. I encourage you to put it in your labs, kick the tires on it, play with it. But also, once we've released, don't let that be an inhibitor from you engaging with the product. All of our downloads are publicly available in the Download Center. They come with eval licenses inside of them. You can actually put them in your lab environments, the most recent version of the code. Get used to that feeling of what it's like to be running the latest version of Exchange. But definitely don't wait till CU5, because that's too late to get the feedback in based upon our revised approach here. Let your ISVs know that 2016 support matters to you. Just like we have customers inside of our Exchange Preview program, we also have ISVs inside of our Exchange Preview program. And so they have access to early versions of Exchange. So they can get their changes in to the product such that you can be successful and deploy them within your environment. And make certain that you get the most out of social media. Take to heart that feedback that I gave you on the proper use of the Exchange Team blog. We do have Microsoft FTEs that do monitor all of our social calendar, our social media, and that feedback does get to me. We take it to heart, but it's not a great support vehicle for individual support cases. With that, I'm going to close. I thank you all for your time. I encourage you, please provide an evaluation. Let us know what you liked about the session, what you didn't like about the session, and Paul and I will hang around for a couple minutes if you have some specific questions. But once again, thanks, and enjoy the rest of Ignite.
Yeah, thanks for coming, and thanks for sticking around. I know you all have places to be, so thanks for being here.